感谢主，我们继续来看10章的后面啊。
Thank God, we're going to continue looking at the latter part of chapter 10.
我们看到这个灵界上的一些关系啊，这个但以理的祷告，虔诚的祷告能够达到神的面前。
And so we see several things from the spiritual realm that Daniel, his prayer has reached to God.
不过在这个祷告当中啊，灵界就有一种征战。
But even in this prayer, that there is still a spiritual warfare that's happening.
所以这个都是我们很难理解的这一种属灵上的奥秘。
And so these are also difficult mysteries for us to understand in the spiritual realm.
所以说我们常常祷告啦，圣灵充满，我们生命会更新变化。
And so then we also pray often, and then we ask to have our life be renewed.
我们本来人都是软弱的，都是脆弱的，好像瓦器一样。
And then previously, man, we're all weak, and then we are just like vessels.
但是我们祷告就是神的能力复庇我们。
But then when we pray, we ask that the Lord's strength come upon us.
我们虽然是个瓦器，但是能够带给我们非常大的力量。
And so that even though we're just a vessel, but then we're actually able to have a lot of strength.
来战胜那个在属灵的征战当中能够得胜。
And so that we're also able to be victorious in our spiritual life.
所以说我们征战的对象不是属血气的，是属空中属灵气的恶魔。
And so what our spiritual warfare is not one in this earth, but rather it is in the air.
我们就是穿戴神所赐给我们的全副军装。
And then we put on the full armor of God.
装备我们自己
And then we equip ourselves.
然后呢，我们就随时多方的祷告。
And we also pray at all times.
让我们能够在这个征战当中能够得力，能够得胜。
And so that we can receive strength in our battle and also be victorious.
有人讲说这个魔鬼的力量很强大，所以神跟他征战一直战到现在都还没有得胜。
And so some people say, well, the power of Satan is quite great, and so that even though God and Satan have been warring for such a long time, God is not able to prevail.
事实上这样的讲法是不对的。
But the reality of this argument is not correct.
我们看到说一个米迦勒都可以跟那个波斯希腊的魔君跟他征战。
And so then we also see that Michael, he is able to fight against the princes of Persia.
所以天使的数目很多很多就靠着天使去征战。即使神都不必出面这个天使就能够战胜他们。所以我们看到那个天使的力量很大
So we see that the power of the angel is quite great.
说那个亚述军队他们本来要来围攻耶路撒冷。
And so we see that the Assyrians, they were going to come and fight against Jerusalem.
以赛亚这个西西家王他要到圣殿里面去祷告。
And then King Hezekiah had gone into the temple to pray.
结果神就借着以赛亚跟他讲说我要用钩子把那个亚述人亚述的王把他们勾回去。
And then through the prophet Isaiah, then he told the king that that they were going to bring back the people of Assyria.
结果一个晚上神派一个天使就杀了185000个亚述人。
And so in one night, then the Lord had an angel kill 180,000 of the Assyrian army.
一个天使 一个晚上一下子就可以杀掉185000人。
And then so just in one night, then an angel can actually kill off 185,000 of the.
主耶稣要被钉十字架的之前呢，
And likewise, before Jesus was crucified.
那些兵丁啊、差役啊，要把他抓走。
And so when the soldiers were coming to capture him.
彼得拿起刀就砍，把那个大祭司的仆人马勒古的耳朵就削下来。
And so then Peter just took out a sword and he cut off the high priest's ear.
主耶稣叫他说：“收刀入鞘吧。”
And so then Jesus told him to put away his sword.
好，他说：“难道我没有办法差遣请神啊，差遣12营的天使来？”
And he said that, am I not able to ask my Father to send a legion of angels?
其实主耶稣如果不让他们抓去呀，那他讲一句话，他们都扑倒了。
And so then, just by one word, then Jesus said that he can actually have them all just fall over.
何况说他有千万万的天使。
And not only that, but he also has thousands of angels.
一个天使都可以杀掉185000人。
And so one angel is able to kill off 185,000 people.
罗马军队他们的一营是6000多人。
And then in one company of the Roman soldiers, there's 6,000 people.
12营的天使就7、8万人。
And then so a legion of angels is 78,000 soldiers.
所以12营的天使就可以杀掉好几亿人了。
And so then they're able to actually there's actually enough angels to kill off several hundreds of thousands of people.
不过我们知道说主耶稣是甘心乐意来担当我们的罪恶，为我们而死的。
But then we know that Jesus Christ, he was willing to go to the cross and die for us.
不过我们从这一章里面也能够了解一些属灵上的奥秘这个天使跟魔鬼之间的征战。
But then we're also able to understand from this chapter that there are several, there is this spiritual war that's going on between the angels and Satan.
另外一个就是这个祷告的奥秘。
And then there's also the mystery of prayer.
我们常常有些人觉得说这个祷告好像很浪费时间哦。
And so sometimes we say that maybe prayer feels as though it's a waste of time.
你就去做事就好了，为什么要花那么多时间祷告？
And so why don't we just do the things that we're supposed to do? Why do we spend so much time in prayer?
但是我们知道这个祷告就是一种属灵的力量。
But then we know that power is a spiritual strength.
让我们借着祷告能够得胜那个恶者
And then through the power of prayer, we are able to overcome the evil one.
让我们的侍奉工作能够非常顺利，可以把人的心力说把那个墙打破，把那个心夺回来，让他能够顺服基督。
And so that we're able to be successful in the spiritual realm and to break down the wall so that we can bring the hearts of men back to God.
真的有时候你在传福音的时候有时候跟他讲，他好像都没有听进去。
And sometimes when we're preaching the gospel, it seems as though we can say all that we are going to say, but yet they're not listening.
有时候他又听不懂。
And sometimes they also do not understand.
就是我们如果为对方祷告的话，神开启他的心有时候他一听就懂。
But then if we pray for the other person and then we can just speak and then God will open their hearts and then they just listen and they understand.
所以这个是相当奇妙的那个属灵的工作。
And this is a very mysterious spiritual working.
我有一次去马来西亚参加那个世界代表大会。
And so one time I had gone to Malaysia to attend the World Delegates meeting.
他们那个时候买了一块地，想要盖那个训练中心。
And so they had purchased a plot of land and they wanted to build a training center.
花了好几年再怎么都没有办法批准，因为那是回教国家嘛。
And so they had spent several years and they're never able to get any permission to build this training center because it's a Muslim country.
他们就大家同心祷告。
And so then they prayed in one accord.
祷告了以后换了一个主管的官员来。
And so after prayer, then there was also a change in the officials.
结果那个官员一看说好 ，OK 就准了。
And so just upon looking at the plans, then the official just gave its okay.
主了以后我们就盖啦。盖起来训练中心盖起来以后后来那个主管就调走了。
And so then they were able to very successfully build that training center. And then after the training center was completed in construction, then the official was actually transferred out again.
所以真的很奇妙，有时候我们觉得人遇到非常大的困难。
And so it's very miraculous, but even though sometimes we meet up with difficulties that we feel is very great.
但是大家同心合意的祷告以后一个一个的困难就慢慢的一个一个克服掉。
But then through the prayer of everyone, then we can see that one by one, these difficulties are overcome.
我想我们在每一个地方教会，在工作当中，在服事当中应该有很多这方面的体验。
And I think that at the local churches that we all have this type of experience as we're working and doing the holy work.
所以这是一种属灵的征战。
And this is a type of spiritual warfare.
我们来看11章。
Let's continue chapter 11.
11章就是第10章里面所讲的这个真切的事情就是征战了。
And so then in this chapter 11 is actually talking about the truth that they were speaking of in chapter 10.
这个第1节里面谈到说，马代王大利乌延年的说这个加百列曾经起来帮助米迦勒，让他刚强。
And then so actually here in chapter 1, it says, in the first year of Darius the Mede, and even I stood up to confirm that at one point that Michael has strengthened him.
这个10章的地方是谈到米迦勒天使长来帮助加百列。
And so then we actually see in chapter 10 that Michael had actually helped Belteshazzar.
所以我们看到这个天使之间他们那个职分都不一样。
And so we see, helped Gabriel. And so we see that even in the angels that they had different types of roles.
他们任务不一样，但是彼此之间是互相帮助的。
And so even though they had different roles, but yet they are helping one another.
所以加百列曾经帮助这个米迦勒让他坚强起来。
And so Gabriel had helped Michael to be strong at one point.
当这个加百列遇到困难遇到这个波斯魔军的阻挡
And so then when Gabriel was meeting up with difficulties and was being held back by the princes of Persia.
米迦勒就来帮助他战胜了波斯的魔军以后这个加百列就很顺利来到但以理的面前，给他传信息。
And then Michael was able to then come and help Gabriel so that he's able to be victorious over the kings of Persia, and then allow Gabriel to come and provide the message to Daniel.
在这个教会当中我们每一个人的恩赐不一样，所以我们领受的职分都不一样。
And so in the church, every one of us has different gifts, and therefore our mission is also different.
所以我们虽然每一个人的在路工作都不一样，但是大家分工但是要互相的合作，互相的帮忙。
And so even though each one of us has been given different duties and works, and yet we have to work together and to help one another.
他说我们看到天使之间是互相帮助的。
And so likewise, we see among the angels that they also help one another.
信徒之间也是互相帮助的。
And among the believers, then we also have to help one another.
这个圣经里面有谈到那个大卫王的时代。
And then the Bible tells us about the time of King David.
他们有一次跟敌人打仗。
And one time that they were fighting against their enemies.
这是在撒母耳记下的第10章。
And this is recorded in 2 Samuel chapter 10.
我们看第9节。
Verse 9.
我们读撒母耳记下10章的9到12节。
Let's read 2 Samuel chapter 10, verses 9 to 12.
James Go 弟兄是吧？撒母耳记下
10
章9到12。
好，撒母耳。
2 Samuel chapter 10, verses 9 to 12.
我翻错，撒母耳记下
10章，
想不起来。撒母耳记下10章
9节。
撒母耳记下10章9节，约押看见我开了哈，约押看见敌人，他在他前后摆阵，就从以色列军中挑选精兵，使他们对着亚兰人摆阵。其余的兵交与他弟兄弟亚比筛，对着亚门人摆阵。11节，约押对亚比筛说：亚兰人若强过我，你就来帮助我；亚兰人若强过你，我就去帮助你。我们都当刚强，为本国的民和神的诚意做大丈夫。愿耶和华凭他的旨意而行。
阿们。这里讲到说大卫的时代有那个敌人的联军要来攻打以色列人。
And so here during the time of David that there was a battle line that was coming to fight them.
约押跟他的弟弟亚比筛他们都是军中的将领他们就要带着军队去跟敌人打仗。
And so then Joab and his brother Abishai, they were all leading the armies at the time, and they were going to bring people to fight against the Syrians.
所以约押就专门对付那个亚兰人。
And so then Joab was going to go fight against the Syrians.
亚比筛就对付亚门人。
And so Abishai was going to go up against the Ammonites.
那所以约押就说：如果敌人强过我，你来帮助我；如果敌人强过你，我就去帮助你。
And so Joab said that if the enemy is too strong for me, then you will help me. But if the enemies are too strong for you, then I will come and help you.
我们为神的国、神的城做当丈夫来刚强征战。
And that they should be of good courage and let us be strong for our people and for the cities of our God.
然后就交给神，求神按他的旨意来行。
And then the rest they handed off to God and made the Lord do what is good in his sight.
所以这个分工我觉得非常好。
And so this type of job distribution is very good.
所以我们在侍奉上必须要有好的同工互相扶持，互相帮助。
And so in our holy work, we also have to have good co-workers so that we can support one another and help one another.
当我们软弱的时候，别人来帮助我们。
And when we're weak, then others can come and help us.
当别人有软弱的时候，我们就去鼓励，就去帮助他。
And then when others are weak, then we can go and encourage and help them.
大家互相的扶助，互相的帮助为神的国来征战。
And so we support and help one another, and we battle for the Lord.
所以这个天使之间是这样我们信徒之间也是一样。
And so this is the example that's set by the angels, and likewise we have to do this among the believers.
我们看11章但以理书11章的第2节到第14节。
Let's come back to Daniel chapter 11, verses 2 to 4.
2节到4节。
Verses 2 to 4.
陈志东弟兄， 请你读好吗？休斯顿陈弟兄，
但以理书第10章
11章第2节。
你们要看到
11章第2节。现在我将真事指示你，波斯还有3王兴起，第4王必护主远胜诸王，他因护主成为强盛，就必激动大众攻击希腊国。
到第4节，
到第4节哈，第3节，必有一个勇敢的王兴起，执掌大权，随意而行。第4节，他兴起的时候，他的国必破裂，向天的四方，方言是作风分开，却不归他的后裔，治国的权势也都不及他，因为他的国必被拔出，归于他后裔之外的人。
好，这次说到那个正确的事就是关于未来这个征战的事情。
And so here he was receiving the truth, and which is for the days to come, and this is about that war.
这个是从那个巴比伦的那个马代王大利乌的时候说起，说这个波斯王还有3个王兴起。
And so this is during the time of the Medes, and then so they were saying that there's 3 more kings that will arise in Persia.
所以总共是4个嘛
And a total of 4.
其实从历史上那看起来那个波斯王不止4个了。
And so from history, we see that there were more than 4 kings in Persia.
我们知道说那个古列王是非常强势的一个王。
And then we know that King Cyrus was a very strong king.
之后他有一个王我们圣经里面叫亚达谢西历史上叫做冈比西斯
And then so then later on in the there is also another king in the Bible is referred to Ahasuerus, and then in the world is referred to as Cambyses.
就是那个以斯拉记第4章里面所谈到那个命令以色列人停止重建圣殿的那个亚达谢西王。
And then so it's actually the king Artaxerxes, that is referred to in Ezra chapter 4, the one that was stopping them from building the temple.
再接下来的第3个王就是大利乌一世。
And then so then the third king is the next king was Darius.
这个波斯王的大利乌跟前面那个马代王是不一样的人
And so the king Darius that is Persian is different from the Darius who's the Mede.
他就是主事准许这个以色列重建圣殿让他们继续完工的王。
And rather, he's the king that would allow them, the Israelites, to go back and start the rebuilding of the temple again.
再来接下去说这个副主的王应该是那个以斯帖记里面所谈到那个亚哈水鲁王。
And so then the next thing, the fourth king, that's a richer one, is most likely referring to the king Ahasuerus in Ezra.
因为他很富足很强盛所以就要去跟希腊打仗。
And then because he is also very rich and very strong, and so then he wanted to go and fight.
所以他不是摆设了很大的筵席，让苏三城的人大家都可以随意在那边吃喝嘛。
And so then he's the one that had a lot of different types of feasts, and then so then people can just come and go and eat there.
然后把他国中的丰盛展览了180天
And then he was the one that would display his wealth over a course of 180 days.
就是那个以斯帖记里面讲的因为他要显示他的那个富足。
And so this is the one that was talking about in the book of Esther, where it says that he wanted to demonstrate his wealth.
这也是他们要去 要去打仗之前的一个好像一个展览，一个宣示他们的国力的强盛。
And so then this is a type of proclamation that they would make before they would go to war, so that they can show how strong and how rich that their nation was.
不过在这一次的征战当中他们惨败。
But then in that particular battle they fought, they actually lost.
所以波斯国因此就慢慢的就衰落下来了。
And so then as a result, the kingdom of Persia started to decline.
最后就被那个希腊帝国取代。
And then later on, it was replaced by the Greek Empire.
所以第3节、第4节这个讲希腊帝国嘛。
And so verses 3 and 4, this was in reference to the nation Greece.
当然这个勇敢的王，也就是指着亚历山大。
And so this mighty king is actually in reference to Alexander the Great.
他正兴旺的时候这个国家破裂，变成四股变成4个部分。
And so when he has risen, then his kingdom was actually broken up into 4 portions.
所以第5节开始就讲到那个南北王之间的战争。
And then starting in verse 5, then it's talking about the war between the north and the south.
其实这个希腊帝国，这个我们前面7章，从7章8章都一直谈
And so we have actually talked about the Greek Empire in chapters 7 and 8.
就是4个兽2只，一个公绵羊，一个公山羊，都是讲这个事情。
And so we had talked about how they're out of the beast, that the ram and the goat, this is all referring to this thing.
它的4个国度一个是在埃及。
And so for these 4 kingdoms, there was one that is in Egypt.
一个是在那个小亚细亚，一个是在马其顿跟希腊那个地方。
And then there's another one that's in Asia Minor, and then there's also one that's in
Minor Asia 跟那个马其顿
in Macedonia.
那这个南方王就是指着那个埃及的那个多利买的，有的翻作那个翻译都不太一样我们一般讲那个埃及的王多利买王朝。
And so then for the southern king, it's most of the time we're saying that it refers to the Egyptian King Ptolemy.
他本来是非常强盛的。
And so he was very strong at one point.
但是他的将帅当中有一个比他更强盛主掌权柄，他的权柄甚大
But then there was another one that came by that was even stronger.
这指着他有一个部下是一个巴比伦的省长。
And so it's in reference to the fact that he had he had someone who was under him, who was a commander in Babylon.
他背叛了这个南方埃及的多利买王所以他就助力这北方的叙利亚王了。
And so he was able to succeed over this King Ptolemy that was in the south, and then he went to fight against the north.
所以后来这个北方的这个叙利亚王他权柄也越来越大。
And then, but this king in the north, the Syrian king, his power became greater and greater.
他说过了几年以后，他们要互相联合，南方王的女儿必救了北方王来立约，但这女子帮助之力存立不住王和他所依靠之力也不能够存立。这女子和引导他来的，并生他的，以及当时扶助他的，都必交于死地这个是怎么 这个第6节就是南方王啊，他就想要跟北方王跟他和好，跟他立约和解。
And so verse 6 is telling us that at that time, then the kingdom of the south, the king of the south wanted to join forces with the king of the north.
南方王就把他的女儿叫做有尼基啊，百尼基啊，就嫁给这个北方王，给他做妻子。
And so then at that time, then the king of the south, he wanted to give his daughter over to the king of the north.
我们知道说古时候在征战当中啊，有的时候都是用女儿或那个宫女给对方的大臣借着这样彼此结亲联盟。
And so we know that in the old days that sometimes then they would give they would actually make marriages for the whole point of being able to join forces together or form covenants together.
这个北方王为着娶南方王的女儿他先把自己的原配就把他离婚掉。
And so in order for the king of the north to marry the daughter of the king of the south, then he had to first get rid of his own wife.
就娶了这个南方王的女儿。
And then he married the daughter of the king of the south.
但是没有想到，当这个南方王死掉了以后，这个女子的父亲死掉了以后这个北方王就把他新娶的妻子这个百尼基就把他废掉把他有关的人统统杀掉。
And so what was unknown and that was going to happen is that when the king of the south he died, then the king of the north he actually got rid of Berenice, which is the daughter of that king of the south, and then also killed all those around her.
因为他废了这个新的皇后，他又迎娶那个旧的皇后回来，那个旧皇后就报复所以跟这个女主有关系的，跟这个新皇后有关系的，全部都杀掉。
And then because he had revived his first wife, and so when the first wife came back to the king of the north, then she got rid of all of the people who were in relation to this second wife.
那所以我们看到说世界上常常有这个国家跟国家用那个女人做交易啦，或者是当间谍啦，从事那个政治活动，这个相当多
And so we see that in the world that there was a lot of use of these women to be able to form treaties and then to form relationships and alliances among different kingdoms.
当然有时候成功但是有时候也常常的失败。
And sometimes they were successful, but other times that they actually were not successful.
那所以就开始了发生的第一次的大战。
And so because of that, then there was the first war that had happened.
刚刚那个是第一次战这个呢，再来这个第7节以下，这个就是第2次的战争。
And so what we had read about in verses 5 and 6, this is the first war, but then starting in 7, this is the second war.
对不起，这个第7节这个是第1次的战争，就是那个南方王南方王那个父王死掉以后就是女主的本家他又有了一个那个女主的本家又有一个孩子出生来继承王位的。
I'm sorry, the one in verse 7 is actually the first war. So after there was a son from the daughter of the king of the south, and then who
应该就是那个百尼基的弟弟了，百尼基的弟弟继承王位了。
Sorry, it should have been the brother of Berenice who was going to become king.
所以他为着替姐姐报仇所以他就率领大军去攻打北方王。
And then because he wanted to, the brother of Berenice wanted to avenge his sister, and so then he waged war against the king of the north.
结果得到胜利以后 把那个以前被掳去的神像啦，还有那个北方王做的神像，通通把它掳回来。
And then so because he was actually successful, then he was able to actually capture all the idols and all the other articles, the precious articles that had been previously taken away.
所以这个是南北方的第一次战争。
And this is the first war between the North and the South.
第二次的战争就是第9节了。北方王他就后来攻到南方来但是他又回去了，被打败回去了。
And so the second war happens in verse 9, which is that the king of the north, he came to the south, but then he was defeated, and so he went back to his own land.
后来这个北方王他死掉以后他的2个儿子又起来带着军兵又来跟南方王打仗。
And so after this king of the north died, then his 2 sons, they brought people to once again come and fight against the king of the south.
但是北方王打败，而且很多人都被杀。
But the king of the south, the king of the north was actually defeated, and many people were killed as a result.
南方王虽然得胜但是他没有长胜。
And so then, even though the king of the south, he was able to win, but yet he was not able to be very mighty.
他说12节里面讲到说，因为他得胜了以后很高傲虽然使很多人跌倒，但是不能够得到长胜。就是你虽然战胜了对方但是呢，后来却为自己留下了，因为你太骄傲了，就给自己带来了祸根就是以后失败的一个种子。
And it's because in verse 12 it says that when he has taken away the multitude, his heart was lifted up, and then and so he will cast down tens of thousands, but he will not prevail. Meaning that even though he won the battle, but yet because of his own pride, he had actually sowed the seed for future trouble.
因为北方王又会来报复所以13节到19节就是第4次北方王又开始来到南方王跟他们打仗。
Because the king of the north will once again return, and so from verses 13 to 19, it records the 4th war where the king of the north came back again to fight against the king of the south.
所以14节说他发动很多人来攻击南方王并且本国的强暴人兴起。
And so verse 14 it says, now in those times many will rise against the king of the south, and also violent men of your people shall exalt themselves.
因为南方王自己本身有内乱。
And then because the king of the south himself had some internal chaos.
所以他们的军队就站立不住。
And then so then their own soldiers were not able to stand firm.
所以没有人在那个北方王的面前能够站立得住。
And so then they were actually not able to withstand the king of the north.
然后他必站在那柔美之地，用手施行毁灭。
And so then he had to actually go and build. They went and built this siege mound.
这个柔美之地当然就是指着以色列了，就是这个王也去扰乱以色列。
Sorry, it says they shall stand in the glorious land, which is that they will also go and mess with the Israelites.
好。但是他扰乱了以后，他后来就回去嘛，
And so after they caused this chaos, then they also went back.
结果他回去以后，这个北方王他就设了一个计谋，要跟南方王要跟他和好。
And so when they went back, then the king of the north set up a devious plan, and so that he pretended to want to reconcile with the king of the south.
所以将自己的女儿给南方王为妻，想要破坏他。
And so then he gave him his daughter so that to destroy him.
但是这个计谋没有办法成就对他没有益处。
But then he was not able to actually be successful.
因为这个北方王他就把他的女儿嫁给南方王没想到说这个女儿跟南方王却非常的相爱所以他这个北方王他的计谋就没有办法成就，想要来破坏这个南方王，但是没有成就。
So even though the king of the north had given his daughter to the king of the south, he did not anticipate that his daughter would actually love the king of the south and therefore form an alliance with the king of the south, and his plan would fall apart.
所以他想要攻击南方的王要攻击埃及后来却没有办法得胜。
And so then, even though the king of the north wanted to come and conquer over Egypt, the king of the south, and yet he was not able to be victorious.
只是要回去的时候得来一些海岛。
And then instead,
从地中海里面得到一些岛屿。
And then so instead, then he was able to only be able to be sucked away.
而且他因为遭遇到那个罗马的军队所以他后来受羞辱还要割地赔款这样。
And then not only that, but then also the Roman army came to fight against him, and then at the end, then he was only humiliated and had to actually pay.
这个是第4次的战争，就是13到19节。
And so this fourth war is in verses 13 to 19.
20节以后就是谈到另外一个王北方王兴起来他横征暴敛，通行国中柔美之地这个王不多几日就灭亡了。
And then in verse 20, it talks about another king that came into place. And then this one, he imposed taxes on the glorious kingdom, and within a few days he would be destroyed.
这个就是北方的王，好像第4位吧第4位。他做王的时候就是一直到处征地因为他要把这个钱去还给那个罗马啦，所以他要跟着百姓收税结果百姓不喜悦，后来他就被杀身亡。
And so this is the fourth king in the kingdom of in the north, and then so because he was trying to gather a lot of money so that he could pay the Roman Empire. And so he started to impose taxes on his own people and their land. And then at the end, then his people killed him.
这个20节所谈到的这个王就是我们在谈的那个北方的小角那个安提阿库的哥哥了。
And so then this is this king in verse 20 is actually referring to the little horn's older brother, that little horn Antiochus, his older brother.
所以21节里面谈到说，有一个卑鄙的王，卑鄙的人兴起来接续做王人未将尊荣给他，他却趁人坦然无备的时候用谄媚的话得国。
So verse 21 says, "In his place shall arise a vile person to whom they will not give the honor of royalty, but he shall come in peaceably and seize the kingdom by intrigue."
这个21节所谈到这个卑鄙的王就是那个安提阿库第4世就是那个伊比凡尼是一个很邪恶的人。
And so then this person that's referred to in verse 21 is Antiochus IV that we had talked about, and he was notoriously wicked.
因为他的哥哥死掉了 他哥哥的孩子接续做王嘛。
And because his older brother had died, and so then he succeeded the throne.
假借说他要来帮助这个侄儿来辅佐他的国家，但是他却利用这个机会他就把这个哥哥的孩子废掉，他自己就起来做王了。
And then so he had actually pretended that he was trying to help the older brother's son and take the throne, but then instead of working with him, he essentially got rid of the nephew and then became king himself.
虽然很多人起来反对他，后来都被他一个一个消灭掉。
And so even though there were many people who came and were against him, but one by one they were all eliminated.
一开始他的那个势力很小
And so at the beginning, his kingdom was very small.
结果他就假借说跟那个南方王要跟他联合起来，跟他同盟，但是没想到后来他就背叛。
And so then so at the very beginning, he started to go with the king of the south as though he was going to form an alliance with them. But then eventually he also destroyed the king of the south.
所以他本来非常的微小，慢慢的强大以后他就攻击南方王。
And so then even though he had a very small kingdom at the beginning, but yet he continued to build a great and mighty army so that he can go and fight against the king of the south.
这个24节说趁人坦然无备的时候他来到国中及肥美之地行他列祖和他列祖所未曾行的，将掳物、猎物、财宝散给众人，又设计攻打宝藏，但是然而这都是暂时的了也就是说他用诡计他本来很微弱的，后来变成非常大的一个强盛的国家。
And so verse 24 is telling us that he was using all kinds of devices and schemes so that he would go from a very small kingdom to one that's much larger.
所以他的后来的工作就是跟南方王打仗一个。
And then later on, then he would go to fight against the king of the south.
28节以后就讲到他怎么污秽圣地。
And then verse 28, it tells us about how he actually went against the Holy Land.
我们就谈到这里我们下个礼拜再把它做结束。
And so we'll end here today, and then we'll continue to the end next week.
所以这个21节以后，这个卑鄙的人就是那个北方王安提阿库。
And so then this vile person that's referred to starting in verse 21, this is actually referring to that Antiochus IV.
先谈到他怎么亵渎圣地。
And then so then we will also talk about how he blasphemed against the Holy Land.
然后谈到他怎么抵挡神自高自大，其实这个就是末后敌基督的一条。
And then he also went against God and his people, and then so it's to talk about him as the prefiguration of the Antichrist.
所以这个11章里面大概有一半的篇幅就谈这个安提阿哥术士，从21节以后一直。
And so a big portion of this chapter 11 is actually talking about this Antiochus IV.
所以这个也是我们要注意的，跟启示录里面所谈的那个兽就是敌基督者。
And then so then it's also what we have to be mindful of, and it's also what's referred to as the beast in Revelations, the one that's against Christ.
我们谈完以后，我们会把末世的末世的小角我们会做一个整理。
And so after we're done with all of this, then we will speak on the little horn of the end times.
我们现在就一起来祷告，结束我们今天的聚会。
And so now we're going to pray together to end today's service.